Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top story.
In every region that we've built the wall, illegal crossings and drug smuggling have plummeted, absolutely plummeted. In the Rio Grande Valley, crossings have dropped nearly 80%. In Yuma, Arizona, illegal entries have been slashed by 90%. Nationwide, ICE and Border Patrol have seized over 2 million pounds of fentanyl, heroin, meth, and other deadly narcotics, saving thousands and thousands of lives.
President Trump said law enforcement has removed nearly 20,000 gang members from the U.S. This includes almost 5,000 members of MS-13, which has been called the world's most notorious gang. Trump also addressed the House's move to try to remove him via the 25th Amendment.
The 25th Amendment is of zero risk to me, but will come back to haunt Joe Biden and the Biden administration. As the expression goes, be careful what you wish for. The impeachment hoax is a continuation of the greatest and most vicious witch hunt in the history of our country and is causing tremendous anger and division and pain, far greater than most people will ever understand, which is very dangerous for the USA, especially at this very tender time.
The president said the burden of illegal immigration is shared across the region, including with the Triangle countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. He says these countries wouldn't take illegal immigrants back before he got in office, but now they do. The president gave a message to the nation following the breach of the Capitol.
Now is the time for our nation to heal, and it's time for peace and for calm. Respect for law enforcement and the great people within law enforcement, so many are here, is the foundation of the MAGA agenda. And we're a nation of law, and we're a nation of order.
Trump gave credit to those he called great patriots defending the border. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
Democrat Representative Steve Cohen is joined by 8 of his Democrat colleagues. They claim the Electoral College is based on an antiquated theory. Congressman Cohen cited the Capitol breach as a reason to push this resolution forward. The Electoral College is established by the Constitution. Therefore, completely abolishing it would require a constitutional amendment. Many Democrats have been calling to abolish the Electoral College, and the last attempt came in 1970.
Florida Representative Randy Fine is calling on Governor Ron DeSantis in the cabinet to divest the state from Amazon, Twitter, Apple, Google, and Facebook. The move is aimed at putting pressure on the tech giants so that they stop censoring conservative voices.
We have a risk in this country, which is when half the country is told that they can't voice their opinion in words, they will inevitably voice their opinion in other ways. Suppressing speech always backfires. And that's what we're seeing here, and I think it's dangerous. We're pushing it underground. They may make people more violent by doing this. It's just dangerous. It's a terrible idea.
In addition to banning President Trump, Facebook also removed a page by the Walkaway campaign, a group which was home to hundreds of thousands of testimonials of people telling their stories about leaving the Democratic Party.
I think we should do our part to pressure these companies to do the right thing and to stop censoring speech. They have the right. That doesn't mean they should do it.
Fine is preparing to introduce legislation to forbid state and local governments from conducting business with the tech giants, including no Facebook, Twitter, or Google advertisements by Florida governments, no using Amazon services by the Florida government, and no purchasing Apple or Android devices by any government agency.
But I think that if Florida takes this stand, and I think if other states begin to take this stand, and I think you couple it with customers taking this stand, I think you will probably see these companies either go away or realize what they've done is catastrophic to their business prospects.
Fine already has support from state cabinet member and CFO Jimmy Patronis, who says the state should add the discussion to the next cabinet agenda. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
Fine's efforts come as a number of world leaders denounce big tech companies for banning President Trump from their social media platforms. Those criticizing the censorship include the German Chancellor, Australia's acting Prime Minister, Norway's left-wing Labour Party leader, and members of the French government. And that censorship is also facing some backlash in the U.S. A local internet provider is blocking access to the two sites. Your T1 Wi-Fi serves parts of Idaho and Washington state. It will be blocking access to Facebook and Twitter starting Wednesday. The company tells NTD this is because customers complained about censorship on the two sites. The company recently told their customers it does not believe a website has the authority to censor what information people see. Their notice also says they've been fielding so many requests to block Facebook and Twitter that it would be difficult to service each customer individually. Although customers can disable access to websites on their own, some don't know how. Customers can choose to opt out if they still want to access the two platforms. And we turn our attention now to Twitter's role in Uganda. After censoring certain political figures, Twitter is now saying that access to information and freedom of expression is important, especially during an election. NTD's Christina Kim reports.
Twitter admits they suspended a number of accounts targeting the election in Uganda in close coordination with their peers. This, as big tech companies are acting in lockstep to crack down on conservative speech. In response, Uganda has banned Facebook and Twitter entirely 2 days before their election. Ugandan President Yoweri Museveni, who has held power since 1986, defended the decision. He said if these channels aren't equitable to Ugandans, there's no reason they should operate in their country. Twitter condemned this move, calling it a violation of basic human rights and the principles of an open internet. They then said that access to information and freedom of expression, including public conversation on Twitter, is never more important than during democratic processes, particularly elections. Many are calling this hypocritical, given their heightened crackdown of free speech in the days leading up to and after the 2020 U.S. election. Twitter censored and blocked the New York Post article that investigated Hunter Biden's potential business ties with Ukraine and China just 1 month before the November election. According to Media Research Center, a conservative content analysis group, 16% of Biden voters would not have voted for him if they had known about the FBI investigation that looked into the Biden family's possible business ties to the Chinese Communist Party. And most recently, Twitter permanently banned President Trump's account for potentially inciting violence. They cite 2 tweets they deemed problematic. Neither of them mention or suggest violence in any form, but Twitter says these tweets need to be taken in the context of the Capitol breach. Some, like reporter Jack Posobiec, are calling Twitter and Facebook authoritarian. One user says Twitter's new policy post is the least self-aware remark. Another says Twitter's behavior gave a pass to autocratic regimes and they lost their moral authority to criticize regimes that are simply following their bad example. Christina Kim, NTD News.
The FBI and DOJ say they're investigating the riot at the Capitol last week. Over 100 people possibly involved have been identified, and officials say they expect to find more in the coming weeks.
Violence and lawlessness at the Capitol building on January 6th have left the FBI and the DOJ with a challenging investigation. Washington, D.C.'s Attorney General says crimes committed range from misdemeanors like trespassing to felony murder. He expects thousands of witnesses to come forward and hundreds of criminal cases.
I think the scope and the scale of this investigation in these cases are really unprecedented, not only in FBI history, but probably DOJ history, in which essentially the Capitol grounds outside and inside are essentially a crime scene.
Days after the Capitol riot, federal law enforcement identified over 170 people. Around 70 of those people have been charged. The FBI said they had help from American citizens to find suspects and received over 100,000 pieces of related digital media. They also stressed that the agency has a long memory and broad reach.
So even if you've left D.C., agents from our local field offices will be knocking on your door if we find out that you were part of the criminal activity at the Capitol.
Weeks before the Capitol riot, the FBI received intelligence about potential violence and made some arrests. Reporting by Don Tran, NTD News.
If you follow the undercover journalists Project Veritas, you'll know they released some pretty incredible videos. Today, they released a video in which a former PBS lawyer lays out a radical plan to re-educate the children of Republican voters. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on those clips.
Kids who are growing up In this video released by Project Veritas, former PBS principal counsel Michael Beller is seen joyously speaking about spikes in CCP virus cases in Republican states.
What's great is like COVID is spiking in all the red states right now, so that's great.
Why do you think so?
Because either those people that come out to vote for Trump, because the red states, or a lot of them are sick and dying.
The video was a compilation of undercover clips. Project Veritas is a nonprofit that says it aims to expose corruption in the private and public sector. In another clip, Beller is heard talking about re-education camps for the children of Republican voters.
Then when Biden wins, we'll go through all the Republican voters and Homeland Security will take the children. And we'll put them into re-education camps.
Amen.
PBS, a public broadcaster, said in a statement, this employee no longer works for PBS. As a mid-level staff attorney, he did not speak on behalf of our organization, nor did he make any editorial decisions. PBS hasn't said when he left the company, so we reached out for comment, but we didn't hear back before airtime. Project Veritas told us that they captured recordings of Beller's meetings with the company as recently as last night. PBS also said that Beller's views don't reflect their values or opinions. Project Veritas asked in a press release, how can we trust mainstream media staffed by individuals like these? Tax dollars pay their salaries. We couldn't confirm the date on which each recording of Beller was taken. Miguel Moreno, NTD News. California's former Republican governor Arnold Schwarzenegger sent a melodramatic message on Twitter in response to last week's Capitol breach. But a comparison he made between that event and a Nazi attack is drawing criticism.
Wednesday was the day of broken glass right here in the United States. The broken glass was in the windows of the United States Capitol. But the mob did not just shatter the windows of the Capitol. They shattered the ideals we took for granted.
The Night of Broken Glass, also known as Kristallnacht, was when the Nazi Party in Germany destroyed and damaged more than 1,000 synagogues, looted Jewish businesses, arrested some 30,000 Jews, and killed close to 100 of them. It all took place in one night in November 1938. Schwarzenegger published this video days after the Capitol was attacked. It was shared over 400,000 times on Twitter and got about 1.1 million likes. But Jewish activist Dov Hikind says he was outraged by the false comparison.
My mother's sisters, brothers, nephews, nieces went straight to the gas chambers the day they arrived. So these comparisons to Holocaust, to Kristallnacht, to Adolf Hitler, we hear this more and more. It's a sickness. It is unfortunate.
Hikind says, however, it was horrible what happened at the Capitol building. In the video, Schwarzenegger also gripped a sword, Conan's sword, and used it as a metaphor for democracy. He says the more a sword is tempered, the stronger it becomes. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
The U.S. has successfully reduced its military presence in Afghanistan, but Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says now the country must shift its attention to Iran.
Iran decided to allow al-Qaeda to establish a new operational headquarters. I would say Iran is indeed the new Afghanistan as the key geographic hub for al-Qaeda. But it's actually worse. Unlike in Afghanistan, when al-Qaeda was hiding in the mountains, al-Qaeda today is operating underneath the hard shell of the Iranian regime's protection. America has far less visibility on al-Qaeda's capabilities.
Saying the terrorist group's presence in Iran could lead to another form of blackmail to coax the U.S. into another nuclear deal. In response, Pompeo is placing sanctions on this Iran-based al-Qaeda leader.
We can't ignore this truth. And just as we have done with other horrible regimes like the one in China, the Trump administrations will look to this as it is, not as we wish it to be. We see the true nature of the Iranian regime and we refuse to indulge it.
Saying the U.S. cannot be under the impression that Iran is a neutral country, calling on the press to take their job more seriously while reporting on international affairs and terrorism threats.
And that a free press is a staple of a healthy democracy. More speech is important, and I can't say that I always agree with everything that's written, but what you write is read, and it matters. Get it right, get the truth, and America will prosper.
Pompeo gave a specific example of a misleading detail in a New York Times report about an al-Qaeda member who died last August.
The Times wrote, quote, that he had been living in Iran was surprising given that Iran and Al-Qaeda are bitter enemies, end of quote. It could not be more wrong. It wasn't surprising at all. And more importantly, they're not enemies. Al-Masri's presence inside Iran points to the reason that we're here today.
Downplaying the relationship between Iran and al-Qaeda is detrimental, he says, because the U.S. needs to acknowledge the truth of the threat, confront it, and defeat it. Melina Weisskopf, NTD News.
Professor John Eastman of Southern California's Chapman University is under fire for his brief speech in D.C. He stood alongside Rudy Giuliani and delivered a 3-minute talk about election fraud. Eastman is the lawyer for President Trump's Supreme Court appeal on Pennsylvania's election. As a result of his speech, over 150 faculty members at Chapman University called for his resignation. University President Daniele Strupa refused to fire Eastman. He said that university staff could only be fired if they committed a felony or were disbarred. Strupa emphasized that he is not above the law. In Northern California, a Bay Area resident's small business is receiving criticism online. Locals in the Bay Area found that Susie Tinsley attended the January 6th rally. Her shop, the Sugar Shack, saw a massive drop in online ratings. Review service Yelp blocked reviews for Tinsley's shop, stating most comments were about news events rather than the shop itself. However, other customers showed support. Signs are taped up in Sugar Shack's windows expressing support of both Tinsley's business and right to free speech. Tinsley could not be reached for comment. Reporting by Daniel Hall, NTD News, Santa Clara, California.
Legal teams discussed whether Governor Gavin Newsom has the authority to shut down the state, saying his actions violate constitutional rights.
With the orders that were coming out of this business can be open, this business can't be open, this is essential, this is non-essential, I believe that the government crossed another line in picking winners and losers.
In Calaveras County, they would allow classrooms to meet and class gatherings for educational purposes, but would not allow a church to have not have an indoor service, but even an outdoor service.
He said they filed a lawsuit against that, which passed, with the same thing happening in Alameda County.
Churches, synagogues, they can't be put on the back of the bus. In fact, they are inherently essential because the First Amendment of the Constitution says they're essential by giving them the highest level of scrutiny and protection under law, under the Constitution.
We were seeing more and more government action out of the governor exceeding his authority. Probably the first one would be the mask deal that he cut for $1 billion without consulting the legislature whatsoever, and then not even disclosing the details of the contract until, a month and a half later?
That's really I think the kind of the overarching issue here is, do we believe that our state works better when we have one person making decisions by fiat, in secret, without anyone's input, and viewing all of us as sort of subjects? Or does it work better when we trust people who have been elected in a representative process?
Law enforcement questioned the amount of force they can use on those who violate health orders.
Are we supposed to cite someone and release them if they're violating health orders, or are we supposed to book them into jail? What if we see a public official violating health orders, as we've seen on the news? Are we supposed to issue a warrant for that public official?
Jones said these questions haven't been answered. He stated he doesn't have the time and resources to enforce these orders, but he believes in equality for enforcing the law.
If I'm not going to enforce it on our communities, I'm not going to enforce it on them.
And everything that I could find, the law was very, very clear. And especially one law in California under the government code that says under these orders that are issued by a public health officer or the governor, the executive branch, and this was legislative law that had the arguments behind it, the input behind it, and went through the proper processes. And the law says the sheriff may enforce such orders. These type of orders, the sheriff may enforce, not shall.
The Reopen California Now conference was held in person and live streamed over the weekend of January 8th. NTD News, California.
Due to the pandemic, a lot of businesses in California are going through a hard time, but that is not the case for the residential real estate industry. Luis DiGonzini is a real estate broker. His observation tells him property selling has kept outpacing listings for months.
As soon as we put a property on the market that is
per se under $1 million, it's going to have multiple offers in 48 hours, which is unheard of.
DeGonzini said the reason behind this is multifaceted. With stay-at-home orders, people working at home decided to leave expensive urban apartments and seek a more agreeable living environment, which is the reason why the suburbs of Los Angeles and San Francisco became popular.
And not only that, it was more of moving from stock market or the other investments that are intangibles into real estate, so more physical, hard assets.
However, the inventory has been continually running low. DeGonzini said many contractors pulled their projects at the beginning of the pandemic, enhancing the shortage of available properties.
One of the things that we're seeing is there's a lack of inventory, and you're seeing multiple generations and buyers go after the same home, in addition to investors like myself go after the same asset for as little as possible, right? So that's generating a little bit of a buying frenzy.
According to the California Association of Realtors, California recorded about 500,000 sales in November 2020, which is the highest number since 2009 and quickly approaching the highest level in 15 years.
I think the Fed is going to do whatever they can to sustain it. Money's cheap. I mean, you take that, you invest it, you get, on my average return on a rental, for example, in the desert, I'm getting 11%, and I borrow money at 3%.
The Press Enterprise reports that last November, contractors filed 1,848 permits in Southern California to build single-family units. But even with more new homes under construction, DeGonzini believes the hot real estate market is likely to last more than 12 months. Reporting by Zach Lee, NTD News, Los Angeles.